the summary of keys in React is React uses this key to associate the output from your components with the DOM element on the screen. And another way that you could mess up React is if you are using the same keys, but not associated with the same data. So let's say I have a list of 3 items, right? And I'm going to use the list index as my key. So the first item gets a key 0, second item key 1, third item key 2. But what I do every time I render is I randomize the data within that list. So what's going to happen is essentially the same as if you don't specify a key. You're going to potentially get the wrong output associated with what's the DOM element that's actually being used on the screen. So it's very, very, very important for the correctness of your program to use a correct key. So what is a correct key? What key should you be using? The way I always say this is your key should be stable and it should be unique. So what do I mean by those two things? Stable. This means that the same piece of data that you're putting on screen, it doesn't have to be in the same order in your list. React will use this key to associate it with the DOM element on the screen. So that's not important. Like the data that you're rendering out to the screen can move around on the order of list items on the screen. That's fine. But the key value should be stable for the data that you're rendering. It shouldn't change. So if you get some data from the server, right? Let's say you get like a list of 10 users in the system. Each user that's being rendered in your list should always have the same key. If you do it this way, you're going to get the optimal performance in React and you won't have bugs. Now, the other important thing is they have to be unique. So if you don't have unique keys, if you're trying to use a key and some of the items in the list end up with the same key, you're going to get strange bugs and behavior just like if you don't specify a key. Because again, React is going to incorrectly associate the output with the DOM elements on the screen. So it's really important to just use stable, unique keys. If you do that, you'll be good to go. Now, I want to talk about some of my thoughts on the design of React as it relates to keys. After doing a lot of these tests, what I've noticed is that I think React went overboard on this performance optimization, and I think they exposed some of the internals of React in a way that they didn't need to. I think it makes sense that they exposed this key property as a performance optimization. But in my opinion, they could have done this as like a lower level API, but provided higher level functions to make it so you don't need to specify a key. So you could actually write, for example, your own map method that takes a list of serializable data and automatically generates unique, stable keys and passes that to React. React could even implement this internally. Like they could have, there's a lot of ways to do this, but essentially you could definitely design React so that by default, which I think would cover 98% of the cases of people rendering lists to the screen, you don't need to specify a key. You just render your output like normal, and the system is able to figure out a stable, unique key for you, or do any other kind of performance optimization it wants, or not do it at all. The truth is, for small lists, 10, 20, probably 100, items, depending on how complex your output is, reusing this DOM element or the shortcut to figure out if it can reuse the DOM element, it doesn't really buy you much in terms of performance. So the way React works outside of lists is it looks at the output of a component and says, hey, are all the DOM element types output from this component? Like, it'll go through and be like, okay, first we have a div, then inside of that we have a span, and then inside of that we have a paragraph. And it'll be like, is that what I currently have on screen? Is a div, a span, and a paragraph? And if it is, it'll reuse those DOM elements. So that's a big performance optimization that React normally does for you internally without you having to worry about it. But for lists, they sort of went, oh no, that's not good enough. We can't spend the few extra cycles to detect if the type of our output has changed. We need to have the programmer tell us if it's changed. I think this is really bad design. I think it trips up a lot of people, causes a lot of bugs, and is just unnecessary in most cases. I think there are cases when you get into really big lists where having access to controlling how React reuses this DOM element, having access to that would be important. I could see this being a valuable performance optimization for huge lists. But the way that I think you have good design is you make the default case, the normal case, simple, easy, straightforward, not bug prone. It should be bulletproof. And it's okay if there's a small performance penalty for that. Because as long as you provide what I call an escape hatch, so what I would like to see is React not require you to specify a key. Maybe it requires you to pass in the data that is associated with the output, so it can serialize it into a key. That would be fine because you're not exposing the internals of how React works. You don't have to worry about somebody creating a bad key or not doing a key correctly. So what I would like to see is React take that approach. Say, okay, our 98% of the time, people don't need to specify a key. It's not important. The performance difference is not significant. So we're not going to make people do that. We're just going to do things the right way so people don't have bugs. And then in the 2% of cases where people profile their code and they're like, oh no, we have a performance bottleneck here, we can expose this escape hatch, this lower level API, so that in those few cases, people can learn how it works and specify their own key. And yeah, so I'll be honest, after this experiment, I'm kind of disappointed with the design of React. I think they could have done better. Now, I will say, I think I might also be viewing this in a different time. So when React was created, this was when browser JavaScript engines were not near as advanced and hardware wasn't as fast. So what I suspect is that they needed this performance optimization a lot more when React was created than now. And they were like, okay, it's needed so often, we're just going to make it the default. I think this is always an easy thing to do when you're designing systems, but I still don't think it makes it right. I think I don't want to say I don't know what I would have done in the same circumstances, but I would like to think that in those same circumstances, I would have looked at this and been like, okay, yeah, 60% of the time, it'll be fine without specifying a key, but 40% maybe now we need to specify a key. I would still be like, in the future, performance is going to get better. So let's just have good design be the default and give people this escape hatch. I think that still would have been the better approach. I could be wrong about this. If you know about how this got developed in React, I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure that would be a fascinating story. But my opinion is the way React has done the key is not good design. I don't like it. We really shouldn't have to specify it. There should be a better API for this.